Well, it has been quite a journey these last couple of weeks. Um, I look forward to trying to catch up on our notes and catch up on our classes, but as it stands right now, we are 3 weeks out from the end of this semester. And so I have emailed you uh, telling you to go to Dropbox. And when you go to Dropbox, the login that I give you and the password that I give you will then open up the Dropbox that is mine, and it will um, you will see a folder that includes um, some free books for you. One of them being the King James Study Bible in a PDF form. I mean, that's all 66 books. It's 2,200 pages long. And then there's a document for the book of Habakkuk. What I'm requiring for you as a change for the class, what I'm requiring is each week you're going to go through the 3 chapters, but it's about 8 pages or more um, of this Word document and highlight something differently. The first week, which is this week, by the end of this week, what I'm looking for is I want you to go through the book of Habakkuk and note that the divisions of the chapters present 3 completely different approaches to the book of Habakkuk. One is looking into the storm, one is trying to look above the storm, and the other one's trying to look through the storm. And just to get us started, because Habakkuk is a fascinating book. Habakkuk includes so many forms of Hebrew language that you can almost summarize all of the Hebrew language, not the Aramaic, but you can do the all Hebrew language, and just using Habakkuk. We're going to start by looking at the interrogatives. We're going to look at the questions, and I want to look at the questions that Habakkuk asks God and how God responds. So what I'm looking for specifically is, what are the questions for this week? What are the questions that Habakkuk asks God? You can highlight that, use that document. You can use the highlight in Microsoft Word, however you want to do it. But the questions that he asks God, and how does God respond? Again, given each chapter, 3 chapters, very simple. But I think this document is a good start, and maybe pay close attention for the next week, which will be some of the language he uses, musical language and such. But it is interesting comparing the Hebrew and the Greek, because I'm hoping that the notes will be in your hand, but that often doesn't happen when we've been down, and we've been down without electricity, some of us, and no video, not an ability to even upload or download on campus. But the notes that I had provided, and that I hopefully you'll have in your hand, are the comparisons that I make between the Hebrew language, Hebrew mindset, and the Greek mindset. For those of us that are New Testament guys, that we have a tendency, like John MacArthur is almost always in the New Testament. It seems like the only time he uses the Old Testament is either for Daniel, because he's a premillennial guy like I am, or as an illustration for something in the New Testament. Of course, the cliche is, in the Old Testament, the truths of Scripture are concealed, and in the New Testament they're revealed. But I would say that that's really a simplification. Of the 7 comparisons that I make between the Hebrew and the Greek, the first one that I would point out is some simple language issues. Like, for instance, in Hebrew, the term and the concept of time is from sunset to sunset. Yom, Y-O-M, Yom is day in Hebrew. And the concept of time, to the Hebrew mind, sunset ends the day and begins the next day. It's the equivalent of our midnight. So when they would begin Shabbat, it would be at sundown on Friday and go through Saturday. Now, here's what's interesting in this comparison. In the Christian church, we are those that are really into traditional services and traditional worship, we often say, well, maybe we could do a Saturday service, and that'd be great. But what I find interesting is, for most of us that are people that are traditionalists, they'll say we do Sunday morning, Sunday night, and a midweek service for prayer, Awana, mission work, etc. Here's what's interesting. Technically, Sunday night service in the Hebrew mind isn't Sunday night. Sunday nights usually take place here in Texas, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock on the East Coast. Sunset. You're technically worshiping now on Monday from the Hebrew mind. To the Greek, there are two words that are used for time: kairos and chronos. Chronos, chronological. And chronos is marked or measured time. It is marked 60 seconds, 60 minutes, etc. Kairos is different. For such a time as this, in the book of Ruth, the Septuagint had kairos versus chronos. Kairos is a moment in time, more than just measured. I often, when I'm speaking on the topic, I'm often comparing it to, do you remember the moment that your child was born? Do you remember the moment that the doors opened in the church and here she came down the aisle? Everything seems to go in slow motion. Culturally, we do this. We measure time by certain moments. And again, Hebrew mind versus the Greek mind. In the Hebrew mind, time has a sort of a malleability. It is measured, 40 days, etc., 40 years in the desert. But moments in time are described in the narrative, not as much measured time. Whereas in the New Testament, the measuring of time is important. 3 days and 3 nights, Jesus said, like Jonah. Second comparison that I would make is the concept of knowledge. In the Old Testament, yada. Yada is to know intimately, whereas it's not knowledge like evidence, belief, fact, rational coherence. I'm not saying they're not, but I'm saying in the Hebrew mindset, everything works together. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. Shema Yisrael, Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. The mind and the heart and your whole being is part of knowing God, knowing it intimately. So much so that when in the Hebrew yada is used, yada actually means, or is actually translated also into sexual intimacy. Cain went into the land of Nod and knew his wife, yada. So to be intimate with God, a foreign concept to any other religion, in Christianity, of course, being born out of the Judaism, we take it really seriously. We're not talking about a God who is distant. We're talking about a God that we have intimacy with. Of course, Jesus built on this as well. Number 3, in the Old Testament, prophecy pointed forward, as you can guess. In the New Testament, they labored deeply. They labored extractingly to point back to the fulfillment of Old Testament Scripture. And one of the interesting ones, number 4 that I build, is the prophecies toward Messiah. If you remember this question that John the Baptist asked, John the Baptist asked it an issue of doubt. He says, tell me, are you the one? But what he was actually asking was, are you one of the two? The Hebrew would look for 2 Messiahs. One the Redeemer, but the other one the ruler. One was the Redeemer who is coming to fulfill, and we'll come to that in a minute, the one who's bringing salvation. But the other one is also bringing salvation in the means of ruling and taking the throne of David. In the Old Testament, when they had the regular cycle of sacrifices and offerings, those regular sacrifices and those regular offerings were for the purpose of covering sin. And so the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the offerings that they would bring, the perfect spotless lamb, it would take them for a year. In the New Testament, it's not covering, it's cleansing. And the offering of sacrifice, the propitiation for sin, Christ's blood being the final blood, according to the book of Hebrews, cleanses us from within first. And it takes us from belief, and then it affects our behavior. It is a profound depth that builds, I think, in the Greek language, that builds on this. The next one that I will try to point out, let's see, prophecy, fulfillment, time, know, cleanse versus covering, Messiah. Oh, the difference between Hebrew language, concrete language. Hebrew language is concrete, whereas the Greek is very dynamic, very descriptive. I'm not saying that the Hebrew isn't, but I'm saying that the Hebrew language is so specific and measured by concrete fact. I really, 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 really enjoy reading the Old Testament, like, for instance, a comparison between the other gods. It's not a vague God issue like Paul in the Mars Hill discussion. He says, I see that you built temple here in the temple, statues to all these gods, and here's one, the unknown God. Well, the Hebrews would never confuse Marduk for Yahweh, for Jehovah. The false gods and the fake gods were vastly different, very different. The final thing that I would point out would probably be, in terms of communication and language, is that you can really see in the Hebrew the description and the adjective use based on the author. For instance, Amos is a farmer from Tekoa, and when you read his writing, it's written like a farmer. It's got dirt under its nails, so to speak. Whereas Isaiah, who's a philosopher, very educated, and again, his use of concrete language is learned and educated. When you get to the New Testament, all of the authors, all of the writers, beginning, I think, Matthean priority, I hold to a Matthew priority, but all of them were so well educated that you really don't have anybody who's a ruffian, if you will. The only one that's ever been accused of that would be James, and that accusation came from Martin Luther, who called the book of James a right strawy epistle. But anyways, that description, that difference between the Hebrew and the Greek, it doesn't change the meanings or the use of the 9 parts of language. But man, does it unpack it differently. And hopefully by the time we're done with Habakkuk, you'll understand and you'll see a real profound use of language in ways that I hope will be a blessing to you. So, if you'll do me a favor, download that document of Habakkuk. You'll note that I also have for you a page on every book of the Old Testament. That's for you to use. You can print them out and use them in your churches. And I also have for you, make sure I uploaded all the right things. The KJV Study Bible, which I don't know if you'll print it, but I hope you'll use it. It's one of the best study Bibles I use very regularly. Really, really enjoy it. So, hopefully this uploads in a way that we can get past the hiccup that we've been going through this year. The hiccup of the snow in Texas and our ongoing constant adjustments. Godspeed. Talk to you in a while.